What do you think of those readings, Chuck? Huh? What would you do?
Glad you're preaching.
Father Chuck Peak is with us today, recently retired priest of the Diocese of Nebraska, former rector at among other things, places at St. Stephen's in Grand Island. And welcome, Chuck and Nancy, his lovely wife. But you can feel my pain, can't you, Chuck? Two such readings. So my choices today were talk about why there's suffering, or what you can supposed to do about divorce, standing before you as a divorced person. So I thought I better write it down so I didn't make any mistakes. These are difficult texts, to be sure, and I want to make sure that what I'm trying to do today is invite you into my own journey and invite you to think about what God might have to say in these texts for you, but not to tell you what one or another way to think or believe, okay? Today's gospel deals with the very real and painful subject of divorce, something that I am very familiar with myself. The Pharisees have tried to trap Jesus into a question about the terms under which divorce is permissible. Not whether or not it is permissible, but the terms under which it is permissible. And Jesus avoids their trap by saying that in his view there are no permissible terms, that divorce and the pain and the suffering it causes are never okay. Well, I've been divorced, and I can tell you it's not that easy, right? It's because of your hardness of heart, Jesus says, that you divorce. Well, I can attest to that. Divorce will harden your heart. I don't care which side of it you're on, whether you're the leavee or the leaver, it doesn't matter. Divorce hardens your heart a lot. And truly, for that matter, life hardens your heart, right? All of life hardens your heart. My life, your life, any life has so many disappointments, so many difficult or even tragic moments, so much pain that you really can't make it through life without hardening your heart to the pain. You can't make it otherwise. But we weren't born that way, Jesus says. We weren't. That's what he's talking about with the children. We weren't born with hardened hearts. We were born with soft and supple hearts. Hearts that beat in tune with the rhythm of God's own heart. Hearts in the shape of God's heart. We were born with soft hearts. Hearts open to God and to wonder and to joy and to love. But as we grow, life throws so much stuff at us that it hardens our hearts. Do you remember the very first really painful thing that happened to you in your life? Can you remember that very first thing that happened? I was 5 years old. We lived in Council Bluffs, Iowa, and I can see it as though it was yesterday. My mom and dad came home from the hospital and we said, "How's Grandpa?" And this was my mother's father, and she collapsed, my mom, into the arms of my dad and started weeping uncontrollably. "He's dead," she said. "He died." And through her sobs, right, I felt the pain and I felt the fear. I was afraid. It terrified me. And my heart began to harden just a little bit that day, right? It was a decade later when my parents told me that they were divorcing. I was 16, 17 at the time, and although I was spared the breakup of our family in my early childhood, the next few years were no picnic either, right? Mom and dad and boyfriends and girlfriends and reconciling and splitting and moving and regretting. There was no escaping the rapidly changing family dynamics. You just had to harden your heart and live through them. Another decade passed, and now I was a young husband and father, working as hard as I knew how to hold our young family together. Living paycheck to paycheck and barely covering, oftentimes not covering, our monthly expenses. Arguing over every small detail of life, what to spend money on, or what to do about food, or how to deal with crying babies, or whether or not we should have ever been married at all. And my heart hardened a lot in those days. Darn right it hardened. It hardened so much that before another decade passed, I found myself lying on a couch in my own priest's office, badly hungover, deeply and emotionally and spiritually wounded, asking for advice on how to negotiate my own divorce. My heart should have been breaking that day, but by then my heart had taken all it could stand. It could no longer break. Life and loss and pain and suffering had hardened it. My priest did a curious thing that morning. He didn't talk to me about my impending divorce, the wounds I was suffering, or the wounds I was causing. Instead, he asked me about why I thought avoiding my pain was a good solution to it. And I learned two things that day that I have not forgotten. That alcohol is no substitute for the real and difficult emotional work that I needed to do. And that a hardened heart is no substitute for a life open to God's Spirit. That was the beginning of a change for me. Of course, nothing has happened to me that compares at all to what happened to Job, right? Talk about suffering. The other one of our readings, the suffering that Job had. Job is just minding his own business, and he becomes entangled in this heavenly debate, right? About faith and about what it takes to destroy such faith. And in the process, he suffers, and suffers mightily. He loses his wife, not through divorce, but through an untimely and unexpected death, an unfair death, right? He loses his children the same way. He loses his sheep and his cattle and his home and his health, one right after another, until you can't help but cry out for the poor guy. Stop it, God! Right? Enough already! And you want to take a swipe at his friends who come with all their sympathetic, right, cynical comments, right? Oh, look at you. What kind of mess have you made of your life, they say. What did you do to deserve this, they say. And you can hear them whispering behind his back, we knew this was going to happen. He thinks he's all that, right? He isn't as perfect as he pretends to be. He must have done something wrong, or none of this would have happened. Sort of like the way they whisper about divorcing couples. He must have done something wrong, or else he would still be married, right? Have you heard the whispers? Have you been the one whispering? Job stands for anyone who suffers. And it is Job himself who finally has enough and cries out to God for answers. Why this? Why now? Why me? And while the answer Job gets about suffering is unsatisfactory in so many ways, it is honest, and it is true, and it is timeless. The answer Job gets, the answer we get to suffering is, there is no good answer for why suffering exists. There is no good answer, Christians. It is not for us to know, God says. The first lesson of Job's suffering is finally that suffering is simply a part of life. But the second lesson, the important lesson, is that in the face of suffering, faith is possible. Restoration is possible. Healing and wholeness and happiness are possible. You can't see that when you're the one in the middle of it. You just can't. But Job knows, and Jesus knows, and anybody who's lived through the pain of life knows healing is not easy, but it is possible. Your heart can soften again. It can. Will you look at your own hearts this week? Will you pull them out? Right? Will you take your hearts out and examine them? Give them a once-over, right? Take a look at your heart. Where are those hard places in your heart, right? What Jesus is saying, as hard as it is to hear, is we weren't born with hard hearts. We were born with soft hearts, but they have become hardened. We must return to that time and place when our hearts are soft again. Soft enough to feel pain, soft enough to know love, soft enough to give love. I am a divorced person. I'm here to tell you that there is healing. It is possible. It happens. Look, I get it. It happens. Divorce might be bad, but people are good. You are good. All of you are good, God says. Pull out your heart. Find those hard spots. Work on it. Squeeze it. Knead it. Poke it. Find it. Soften them. We all get hardened by life, but we don't have to stay that way, you guys. Life offers joy. It offers pain too. There's no question about it. We can't live without the pain, but we can live without letting the pain harden and destroy us. Never for a minute forget that God does not cause suffering and pain, but God can sustain us through it, and God can restore us from it. God calls us to live with soft hearts, pliable hearts, open hearts, because it is only when we will live as we were born, with our hearts soft and pliable and open, that God's love can get in and God's love can get out. Amen.